I have a question for all of you lot. How does someone with all the power, influence, wealth and status, how do they feel lonely? How do they get in a state of loneliness? And today we're going to be talking about the Lonely King. Before we do that, let me chuck some science at you. John Casipo, who is the director of the Center for Cognitive and Social Neuroscience of the University of Washington, stated that the lonely brain is different to the non-lonely brain. And that's common sense, right? But the lonely brain is more susceptible to think about negative social images, whether it be for themselves or of others. Let's dispel a common misconception about loneliness. Lonely people are not more isolated. They may perceive that they are in a state of mental isolation and seclude themselves in the confines of their own inner beings, but that is usually when they are alone. I've always thought that when you are completely alone and by yourself, your deplorable and admirable self is evident and on display. You will do actions void of consequences, praise and approval. You don't care because no one's watching you. You don't need to do things to impress others, nor do you have to do things to, you could, especially with the internet, you could do things in complete anonymity or false sense of anonymity, which makes them feel like, oh, they can do whatever they want without any consequences. And this is really bad because not only do they get themselves into trouble or a pickle, but at the same time it diminishes and eats away at the ability for humans to be innately empathetic, and thus it makes it even more difficult to relate to other people and thus enhancing their lonely nature. The problem with loneliness is that it can create its own self-defeating behavior. Now, with the example of Dragon Ball Super Zen-Oh, I have dubbed him the Lonely King. Think of it like this: it's more quiet at the mountaintop. There's room for less and less people to occupy this space. If you think of it like this, you're royalty, you're powerful, or any position of influence, and you are at the top of your food chain, business chain. You are at the pinnacle of your respective pyramid. The proportion of people whom are going to be fake, tread eggshells and kiss your ass will be exponentially higher. How do you sieve out the bullshitters, the bum lickers from the real people? So therefore they feel loneliness. They feel as if that they can't be themselves, and that is very evident, especially with Zen-Oh. Who the hell is he going to talk to? He got these people who are so terrified of his power. Now here's another thing about loneliness. It's said that loneliness can make someone feel like, oh, they can see a danger, a social danger, when it's not really there. But what does that do? That makes you always on the defensive. That makes you always on edge, and thus you are also easier to switch on. You are easier to just crack, switch, get aggravated, get pissed off, lose it. And that is exactly what we see with Zen-Oh. Listen, all the things I'm talking about loneliness, there are far more complex phenomena to explain and go into detail, not including the fact that with each individual is very different. But with the case of Zen-Oh, it's very, very evident that this guy is lonely. Yes, he's a fictitious character, but at the same time, take the example of he is royalty. Look at his position. He is also, and this is the most important thing, he is exhibiting a childlike personality, a childlike persona. Let me put it like this: an adult who suffers loneliness will be far more irrational than, let's say, a child, because of the fact that, look, you have to factor in each decision may or may not be influenced by what they identify as a social danger. Essentially, this is influenced by their age, by their experiences, by their friend circle, which you'd think is far more bigger and vaster due to them being older. I know this is a gross generalizations. Of course, children can also exhibit such behavior, but it's far less likely, because the way I look at it, children who suffer loneliness show behavior in its more purest form. They're more rational the way they go about things. You know, they'll show the sadness, they'll show that they might even speak about it when prompted. However, adults don't do this. But when we're talking about fiction, we're talking about Zen-Oh, who obviously is lonely. What can he do? Like, honestly, he's a child. He's exhibiting childlike behavior, so he just wants a friend. It's so pure. He just wants a friend. Look, he wants someone to play with him, and that's exactly why I told Goku. Yes, I know in the episode they did reveal who he's going to play with, and I'll move on to that in a second or a minute or so. But the point is, Zen-Oh is more lonely and he's a child. And not only that, we've established that when you're more lonely, you have more barriers, thus you're always on the defensive. If you see episode 67 of Dragon Ball Super, what did he do? He just didn't like the environment of the future timeline, and he just blew up the whole timeline, and you can assume he blew up all 12 universes. And before that, we learned that there was 18 universes, and Zen-Oh just blew 6 of them up. because he was ticked off for whatever reason. The point is, he's always on edge, and he's very impulsive, and you'd expect that from being at the top of the pyramid, being well, not being, but exhibiting and showing childlike behavior or a childlike mindset to the way they go about things. And that's why I believe that the introduction of a future Zen-Oh to accompany and befriend the present Zen-Oh, and thus being playmates, has a far more deeper and philosophical meaning, in the sense of, how do you conquer loneliness? The people who are feeling lonely, they just want to meet one friend, or at least one person who can at least identify or relate to them in every single level. They can speak to them without being judged, speak essentially to themselves. You would want to clone yourself to be exactly like you, and then you can just relate to each other. That saying, if only I could clone myself and yeah, I'll get the job done. That's exactly what it is, and that's how you tackle and defeat loneliness. Because you know what the truth is? There are infinite amount of people out there who would be able to relate to you, who would be able to become your friend if you would just let them. Now, that's the thing with Zen-Oh. Look, he never had that barrier or those barriers in his way. Maybe he did, due to the fact that he couldn't communicate with the people under him, or the people who are at such a lower level. And by communicating with, let's say, Goku didn't know the whole, hey, he's royalty, I shouldn't really be doing this, that. And that worked well for him. That's the reason why you see these Disney movies and all these other fairy tale movies where essentially, oh, the prince or the princess, they get with someone of a much lower status due to the fact that they don't feel judged, and they can be their true and innate self without the need of putting on some sort of persona because, hey, I'm royalty, or I am required to behave in that way. And that is exactly what we see with Zen-Oh and Zen-Oh. And if you want to conquer loneliness, you need to find someone and just go out there, because you know what, you can always fix up. And yes, this isn't supposed to be how to conquer loneliness. It's more to display and show why Zen-Oh is so lonely. And his one problem, and this is the question I'm going to leave you lot for this video: being friends with someone who's exactly identical to you. In the case of Zen-Oh and Zen-Oh, what happens when you have flaws and you don't like certain flaws within yourself, and they also exhibit those same amount of flaws? It's only a matter of time before you get into a disagreement. And if you're a child and you're playing with someone, how long is it gonna take for you to have a disagreement with, I don't know, hey, you broke the toy car, or oh, you cheated on the PS4, etc. I know Zen-Oh doesn't play PS4, but the point is, it's only a matter of time before disagreement occurs. And I leave you with that due to me working on a video talking about a potential villain, and I'm sure you've sussed it out by the end of this video. Hopefully I can release it very soon. You may now exit Dimsy's domain. Thank you, and don't be lonely. Goodbye.